Beatles suite, I talked to him about waving. Here it is.
John, what were they throwing up on a stage in Philadelphia last night?
Everything bar their limbs, I think.
I know.
I'm sorry, that was my fault. This is John Lennon talking about what the kids throw. Folks, the stages were littered with cake, all kinds of cake. They brought cupcakes, full big cakes, and dumped them onto the stage. And then they threw jelly beans and you'll hear John talk about it. You must remember, in Great Britain, jelly beans are very soft. In America, you'll hear what John thinks of them in America. They threw articles of clothing, bras, panties, you name it, they threw up onto the stage. And you heard me say that they even threw a frozen T-bone steak in Chicago, which if it had hit one of them in the head, could have killed them. Okay, I'm sorry. Thanks, Erica.
John, what were they throwing up on a stage in Philadelphia last night?
Everything bar their limbs, I think.
I know jelly beans were thrown. Anything else?
Jelly beans, yeah. There was a sort of carton of milk or half-empty carton of milk, bit of cake I had stood in. It's not much fun, you know.
How about all the cakes that you get? Do you like cake?
We're not all that keen on it. We're going off it gradually. There's mania for cakes, only it's the thought, you see. And if we do get stuck with a lot of cakes, which sometimes happens, we always give them to somebody or other.
You were saying the Americans must have a great yen for cakes, don't they?
Well, either that or they're very good cooks. They like making cakes, you know.
Somebody asked you in the news conference yesterday about Pittsburgh. What was your remark? They said that they wouldn't let you in any of the hotels in Pittsburgh.
Oh, I said I didn't think we were going to I didn't know we were going to Pittsburgh, I think.
Which is really true. You don't know all the cities that you're going on. You just kind of get on a plane and go to the next stop, don't you?
Well, when we got here, or before we got here, we were given a list of all the cities. There's so many.
Yeah.
It's just not worth learning them. We just learn them on the way there.
Anything that's really bothered you on the tour, or anything that's kind of gotten to you?
Nothing really. I just prefer if the kids wouldn't throw, you know, anything. I know they only want to give us jelly beans, but we don't like them.
You don't like me?
You know. Yeah. And it hurts, and it's dangerous, you know.
Maybe they could toss these streamers or something, you know, papers.
Streamers, great, yeah. Balloons, things like that, you know, so all, nobody gets hurt, but jelly beans and bits of cake, because they must know we can't eat them once we've trodden on them. And they do. The American jelly beans are hard. In England, it was bad. Phone. You know, but they're only soft jelly beans over there, and it was rough then. But over here, they're made out of rock.
Have you been hit with any? I mean, actually, you know, hit in the head.
Yeah, last night I got hit with two. And it's hard to sort of sing if you're smiling. And one just got me on the temple. Another one got me on the chest. And one got George on the guitar hand. He had to stop playing, you know. It sounds like complaining, but we like the idea if they have to sell us them, even though we don't like them, send us them. I mean, send them, you know, like people send letters or parcels rather than throw them. Please, please, that's all I say. No jelly beans and bits of cake and things, and combs. We've got combs.
And that was John Lennon. John and I developed a very special relationship. We kept in touch after the tour. I had an appointment with him about a week after he was killed. I called him up when I was Hubbard Broadcasting had hired me to manage their station in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Hubbard Broadcasting owns KOB television here. They did own the radio stations here, and so I was going to Minneapolis from LA. If you want a culture shock, you try that sometime. And so I called John and I said, look, I'm going to work in Minneapolis. That's closer to New York. I can fly in. I'd like to sit down with you. and let's reminisce about the tour coming up to the 20th anniversary. That would have been, in what, 64, 70, 84. And I said, I'd like to write maybe a magazine piece or even a book. And he said, great. And we made the date. And of course, he was killed. But he and I, the first night I was ever, well, the first, I met them, of course, in New York at the Forest Hills. When we went back to Atlantic City, I had just been there 10 days covering the Democratic Convention. We had to go back to Atlantic City. And so when that night, Lennon said to me, Art, he said, you play Monopoly. I said, well, I'll play with my kids. He said, I got a board. And I said, are you serious? He said, yeah. He said, George and I play, but he said, none of the other guys, they play poker. I lost my first paycheck in the Army in a poker game, and I've never played poker since. And so I said, yeah, I'll play. Well, it wasn't just let's play a game. With Lennon, it was play all night. You know how long the damn games last anyway, and it took forever. But we'd end a game, and it'd be 2 o'clock in the morning, and he'd say, one more game. Well, he kept saying that, and the sun would be coming up, and I said, you guys can sleep all day today. I got to work all day. But that was our relationship, and we had fun playing Monopoly. George was the banker every time. John accused him many times of cheating. John wanted to win. He didn't care as much if he won the game. Well, he loved win, but he wanted to land and have Park Place and Boardwalk. Well, you know they're the most expensive properties on the board, and so he would spend so much money to get them that then he wouldn't have money enough to build houses, and of course he generally lost the game. But he would stand up every time he had to roll the dice. He never sat down to roll the dice. He stood up. And I used to say, I said, I'll bet you're something in Vegas, because he was really intense roller of the dice. But we had great times, and when I think I did not ever take my tape recorder, and I wish I had, but you didn't do those things in those days. Maybe you don't today. But the point was that he would stop the game and call his wife, and he would have her put John on the phone. Now, John was 18 months old, and I didn't get one recording of him going, talk to Daddy, goo, 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 talk to Daddy, and I just think I could have had that. It's just like on the plane, he and Paul wrote music when we were on the charter. I sat with John all the time. Those of you who maybe have flown charter planes, especially in the news business, once you have a charter and when you get on, your first time on, that's your seat. And you sit in that seat all the time. And so I sat down. Well, John sat down next to me on the aisle. I wasn't sitting on the aisle. I moved in one seat. And John sat there. So we sat together on the plane all the time. Paul would come up, and they were writing music. Folks, there were paper. The floor of the plane was flooded with paper that they discarded, writing music. Do you think I picked up one piece? One piece. I didn't. And that may be why it took me so long to get through school. But the point is that I should have done that. Anyway, that was my relationship with John, George. George would sit for a whole night, and I'll bet he wouldn't say 10 or 15 words. He always wanted to land on the B&O Railroad and get it. Now, why? He could never tell me, because I asked him many times. If you'll notice in the scrapbook, when they all wrote above their pictures something to me, George Harrison wrote something about the B&O Railroad. He just wanted the B&O for some reason. Okay, now about the waving. Here is my interview with Paul McCartney about the waving to the fans.
Paul, are you going to get a chance to wave? I understand the rumor, at least. I was down among the crowd, and I
saw you.
Did you?
I saw you, yeah, from the window.
Well,
I saw the police moving you on, too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're moving everybody on down there.
I thought so, yeah.
Are you going to get to wave to them?
Well, I was waving before, actually. The police told us not to, but I thought, be a bit sneaky, you know. A little bit of a sneaky trick, and we'll wave.
Give them a break.
Well, you know, I mean, I'd feel daft if I was down there in the crowd and nobody was waving. Actually, there's been somebody waving from one of the top windows anyway, not one of us, but, you know.
Were you concerned at all last night when they started to storm the stage?
No. You know, it looks more frightening than it actually is. Because, I mean, did you see the amount of police that came out? It was like a little army, you know. Well, you can't be worried when you know all that amount of cops are there, you know, to look after you.
Okay, now, and finally, folks, I want to tell you how that man you just heard, Paul McCartney, saved my job and saved my career. As I told you, the bureau chief, a man by the name of Jim Snyder, didn't want me to cover the Beatles tour. He didn't want anybody on the Beatles tour. He didn't think it was a story that we should be covering. Here was his reporter that was covering presidents and manned space and Martin Luther King, and now suddenly he's going to be covering the Beatles. He wouldn't speak to me once that I got on because he was overridden by the president of the company. When I was in Milwaukee, my phone rang in my hotel room one afternoon, and it was Jim Snyder. He said, my daughter's going to see the Beatles in Baltimore. He said, I want autographs. And we had made a deal with the Beatles from the very beginning that we would never ask for an autograph. I said, Jim, I can't do that. He said, what do you mean? I said, we made a deal, there are no autographs. He hung up on me. He never spoke to me the rest of the time. When I would call in my stories 3 times a day, Jim would never talk to me. We were now on our way back to New York, the final tour, the final leg of the tour. The Paramount Theater in New York was their final concert. I have a ticket, you'll see it in that photograph, for $2.50 at the Paramount Theater. It was a charity event, I might add. And, okay, we're on our way back to New York. We'd picked up the Beatles where they had spent some time in Missouri at a ranch owned by the owner of Flying Tiger Airlines, which was the charter they used. And Paul came up looking for John. John wasn't there. I said, Paul, do me a favor. He said, what? I said, my boss's daughter, Margaret Ann Snyder, saw you in Baltimore. And I said, she waved to you. And she thinks you waved back.